Hello and welcome to Project Pack number 23. This is Julie.
And my name is Molly.
Hi, Molly.
Hi, how are you? This is day one, part one. And we are going to start this project pack off sort of preparing our surface. We have some materials here. As you can see, I have a little vessel of water, and then I also have a vessel of tea.
Which is not for drinking.
Not for drinking. We'll talk about that in a minute. I have a couple of pieces of paper here, and we'll explain that later. Those just came from the recycling bin. If you can find something, maybe a thicker piece of paper might work well. And then these are the beautiful tools that came in our project pack.
Yes, so they are some watercolor pencils and our paintbrush.
Yeah, and these colors were actually researched when we were looking into illuminated letters. We did look at kind of the colors that came out about, and they were these jewel tones of greens and reds and blues. And so that's how we did choose those colors.
These are my favorite.
And we are doing this a little bit outside the box from an illuminated letter. So we're really drawing inspiration, but kind of trying to figure out how do we want to work it into what we're creating here. So before you get started with your surface, I want you all to know that you don't have to do this bit. I also want you to know that you should watch this whole video through before touching your surface. This is definitely a video you want to watch, soak in, and then figure out what you want to do.
So Molly here is adding some of her tea.
My tea. Yeah. It's a single bag concentration, I would say. It's a 1 tea bag concentration. We played around with 2 and 3, and I invite you to do the same. But really the goal here is to kind of create a more nuanced background, to like add another layer to what the Tiepolo is offering, or that's the type of paper we use. So it's like this little bit of a tint, right? Would you call it?
Yeah.
Like just a tint there.
A wash.
Yeah. And I'm working just with the tea by itself in this larger surface here. And just, it's almost like it's just dirty water, but it kind of adds sort of this interesting tinted surface.
Gives it like an old world
feel. Exactly. And that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah. You can also fill this space with color if you wish to. You don't have to use tea to do this. And we, in a few minutes, we'll talk about using those watercolored pencils. But this definitely does give it
just a little bit of difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is important to note that we are going to be filling this whole thing with tangles. So I encourage you not to make it too dark, because you're going to want your microns to really pop off the page. So this is just to kind of create a little bit of layering and a little bit of interest. And as we said, you don't have to add any of this before we begin. You can actually say, I'm going to do this project without any of the underlayered background color.
But also, if you do want to add color, don't be afraid
to
just jump in there and fill this space. You'll see as we go along, we're not looking for perfection.
Right.
We never are.
And any project where you're like sort of like taking the lead or being guided through it, it's sort of an interesting process to be like, well, maybe I wouldn't do this if I was like sort of on my own, but I'm now enjoying this, and sort of pushes you in a direction you might not go in otherwise. So I'm also picking this other space up at the top to do with just the kind of tea by itself. You can kind of see the difference, how it's adding a little bit of color. My mom had done a test batch before, and she did 3 tea bags, and it came out really dark, and it was beautiful, but I was like, I think we want something a little more neutral and subtle. Yeah, good. That's a good word, Julie. I like that.
But this already just looks great.
I know, right? And I don't know if you've worked with the brushes before, but I put quite a bit of water down and then sort of move it around with the brush. These are nice brushes. They're really beautiful, and just take your time.
I also found too, when I was doing it, there was one time where I added too much water, and I just took a paper towel and blotted it, and it totally fine. You couldn't tell.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention that. I do have a paper towel here. You might have another one that's easily picked up. At certain points, I've actually just taken my finger and sort of re-picked up some of the liquid. But yeah, the paper's very forgiving, and having a paper towel nearby to sort of like, if you do like a little bit too much or it goes off to the edge, it does actually pick up very easily. That's a good point.
And because this is 100% cotton paper, it really accepts that water well.
Yeah, definitely. So you can see the sections I've chose to use this technique here. And I am also putting some of this in the middle here, which is going to be sort of our sacred space for our letter eventually. And we will be leaving that till the end. So I'm putting this in here just because I think it'll add a nice layering. But in honesty, we're going to be putting stuff in there, so you could leave it blank as well. So that's up to you.
I left mine blank too. So.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. So we're going to put this aside for a second here. And, oh, I forgot those little triangular pieces there. I can't wait to fill this whole thing in. It's going to be really fun.
This big surface just invites so many tangles and the opportunity to work big and small.
I know. And one of the reasons we've invited you to watch this first and wait till the end is that we show a whole bunch of variations at the end of this video. So I just wanted you to see what's possible, and you don't have to necessarily follow along with this exact. So here I'm kind of picking up some of that leftover water that settled a little bit, just with the brush itself. And like Julie said, you could use a little paper towel. I also like sometimes that puddled water will dry and leave kind of like a water stain, which to me is interesting too. So,
yeah, it's a texture.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. So as I was saying, we're going to put this aside for a minute and then prepare our color here. And we're doing it a little bit different than we have in the past, where we're going to almost create like a watercolor cake with the pencils. It's just a cool way you can use them.
Just really heavy-handedly putting down that watercolor pencil on your scrap paper.
Wow, it looks like my hand's going really fast.
I
know. And you can always add more, so it's just a starting point. I'm preparing the 3 colors on different pieces of paper. You can put them all on the same. Like I said, this was some paper I pulled out of our recycling bin. It must have come from some packaging or something. But if you have like a little piece of cardstock or thicker paper, this works well. And
because you are going to be adding water, so like a copy paper probably isn't going to hold up as well. But
yeah.
I do love these colors.
And it's a fun, like, another approach. When we've done this in other projects, we've added the watercolor pencil straight to the surface. So this is like, oh, this is another way you can do it. So I'm going to put those aside. And then you may want to wait till your other areas are dry if your hand's going to rub against them. I think it looks like mine's still a little bit wet, but
just be mindful of that.
Right. And I'm actually working with the tea as a base instead of the water because I thought it would kind of add some kind of antiquing to my colors. So the first thing I do is just put down the tea water, I think, on here just to kind of get the surface wet. And then you can kind of just drop on the color, and it sort of fills it in nicely in this really organic way. It's so beautiful.
I know, it's like mesmerizing just to watch.
Yeah. So again, I'm putting the tea down, just getting it, a little bit wet. And you can kind of feel out like how much water you want to put down. If it seems like it's not enough, you can add some more. And it does like move around a bit. Yeah. So
I love the way the tea water just kind of subdues those pencils a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And we're sort of taking inspiration from these older works, right? Like this, these things that have lived, beyond their years in so many ways, and to see that kind of aging of them. And so it's kind of fun to kind of play around with that inspiration. I actually love doing this. It's like a fun process.
It is very relaxing.
Yeah.
It's like tangling. It's just take your time, one spot at a time.
Nice one, Julie. And honestly, working with a brush is a little bit different. So if that's new for you, just take your time. If the brush starts to look dry at all, put it back in the tea or the water or whatever it is you're using, and make sure you have enough water in there. It should be kind of moving around smoothly. And you'll notice if it's dry, it'll start to kind of like look like it's rubbing.
And you're just using a light touch.
Mm-hmm. And we've said a couple times before, we're really not looking for these colors to be too dark because we're going to want the microns to rise above and just really like a little bit of a wash. And that's why we're putting down the tea or water beforehand so that the colors are just getting like a muted wash that's getting put down.
The watercolor is like a supporting actor for the microns.
There you go.
It is award season.
Right. This is a nice green too. It's just like really pretty. So you don't want to rush through this, but
you don't want to rush through this.
Julie's full of puns today. But you do want to move along actually at a pace that allows so like you don't want the water to dry.
And it dries quicker than you think.
Yeah, so I would say you just want to kind of keep moving, and especially in this piece where we have like a circle or where you're trying to meet up a space that like you've already done, you might think about re-wetting like the old part, and having when it dries, you'll see that it leaves little water marks and stuff. And that's part of the beauty of it too. So you don't have to worry too much about that. But you do want to kind of blend it with the water.
And you'll notice that Molly is keeping those thin little borders untouched.
Yeah, we have some plans for that. So, I mean, in some of the instances, we have added color to that and we can play around with that, but it might be easy enough to not touch the borders. So there's the little ring there. So we've added green to that. We're going to put the green aside for now. If you ran out of, pencil, you add more. There's like no finite way that you have to do that. So I'm going to be working on this bigger border out here now. And I'm going to play with the red. So again, the first thing we do is add water to this space. Or tea, or coffee.
Or coffee.
Yeah. And then add water to the red. It's like fireworks.
I know.
And I kind of put it down in dots, but I don't really want to leave it in dots. I kind of want it to kind of blend in a little bit. So, although that is cool. And you guys might get inspired to try some other works with these kind of background washes. And just taking my time to kind of fill the space to where the string lines go. This also blocks out our composition for when we start to add tangles. You have more of a visual of things being different levels.
But you can already just see the character that this is taking on, and everybody's is going to be different, and I can't wait to see them all.
Right. So I've chosen a palette where I actually am going to use all three colors, but in our examples, you'll see that you don't have to use all of the colors. You might say like, oh, I really just like the green, and I'm going to put just the green in here, or I'm going to use two of the colors, or and I kind of like the idea of the wash not being like one solid color. So in the green and the red, I wanted the red to be more intense in areas and more kind of washed out in areas.
Gives the whole piece movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we've said a couple times that we recommend watching this through, and you might get to the point where you can kind of skip along and see all of it, and that's fine too. But you want to kind of register, how the technique's done, and then perhaps you try it on another surface before you go.
Especially if you've never worked with the watercolor pencils before, if you've never done something like this, it will be fun to experiment first, and then you'll get hooked.
Right.
I did two of them, and I was like, wait, I want another one.
Want more?
I want more.
A great way to sort of practice would be if you have a small tile because it's the same paper, so you'll really get a feel of how the paper. I actually did quite a few on tiles, so I have some beautiful tiles ready for me to. Oops, see, I went over the lines a little bit. I just kind of took my finger and picked up that water, but as Julie said, a
tissue
works well.
Paper towel. I actually used a tile as my paper for the colored pencils to put it on, and then I saved that and I'm going to use it to tangle on as a string.
Oh, that's cool.
I did 2 colors on the same, so they began to bleed together.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. So that's going to be really cool.
I made sure I saved that for.
And I can actually tell you the reason that those two, just a minute ago, those 2 things bled together is because I didn't let the other area dry. So another reason to like maybe let each section dry before you move on. Or you can be like me and be like really impatient and just want to do the whole thing. If you can
wait. I couldn't wait.
And it does look different when it dries. Like you can even see the other side of it starting to change and kind of dry a little bit differently.
Yeah, so trust the process.
There you go. So I have one more color I'm going to add here, this beautiful rich blue. It's like a sapphire.
Love this blue.
And I'm going to use the fatter border around that center square. Again, we're going to leave those thin borders. They're hard to add the watercolor to, but we also have a plan for them. So it's hard to tell like how much of the water area you want to kind of get wet before the area you want to get wet before you start to add your color. So magical.
I know. And this blue really is just so lovely.
Yeah. And especially with the blue, it seems to be a more intense color. You really don't need that much because it can get dark fast. So play around with just adding a little bit to get more of a wash than a. And one of the things that's going to be an option when we're, towards the end of this project is that even if you didn't put your wash down, or if you did, we might bring the pencils back to add in when we're doing some shading techniques. So if you decide not to use the watercolor backgrounds, but you're like, what if I want to add color later? There are some techniques you can do with watercolor pencils later on. And so that might be an option. You can't put a wash down later. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. But there is ways you can add little bits of color and interest if you're like not ready to do a wash. Just subtle little bits. Take care of your brushes. When you're done using them, make sure you kind of dry it to a point so that when it's not being used, it has that really nice point and kind of reserves that. I didn't actually even use the water at all, but I have it there just in case. I'll use it to clean my brush.
I love this, Molly.
I know. It's like you can't stop. You're like,
just a little bit more. A little bit more.
Yeah.
But it is such a fun process. So give yourself some time to sit down and really just focus on it and take your time because you will enjoy it.
Yeah.
No mistakes.
No mistakes. It's always fun to have tea too, right? So here's the one we just did, all dry. So you can kind of see how the tea looks alone, especially next to the white. Here's another one. And I found this one, it came out a lot darker. And in my head, I was like, the next time I do this, I want to do it lighter. So just because I was thinking about my tangles, they're both going to work well, but I'm going to see how that one kind of pans out. Added the blue to the border, you can see on this one. Again, it's an option, so we'll see.
It definitely changes it a little bit, but it's still great. So if you have done your borders, it's
an option.
It's an option. So this is one of mine, and I actually used coffee instead of tea because
I kind of love the color.
I'm not a big tea drinker, but I do like my coffee, and then I just use the red pencil with that.
Beautiful palette, a little more muted. This is going to be unbelievable.
And then another one I went in a different direction, and this is just the green and the blue, and this was just water, so no tea or coffee.
Pretty.
And gave like a marbling cloud effect of just putting down big blobs of color and then letting them blend together.
Awesome. This last one is Martha's, and she actually used this thing that's called, or this stuff that's called butterfly pea tea. And I've seen it around in the last year or so. It's kind of a popular item that people, and it's a natural item that makes things purple. And it's really like, it's almost like fairies make it, I think. I'm not really, or butterflies. And but I think it's a natural flower that makes this this tea, and it's purple. And so she used that with her watercolor pencils. So she's going to have like a totally different look. It's going to be really fun. And she did a little something artsy there with the drips and everything.
Yeah.
So
I can't wait to see how she uses those with her tangles.
I know.
But this is really beautiful.
And as we said before, you all can add these beautiful colors to your tiles before we start tangling. But if you want to just do a pure black and white one, that's an option too, because the wash isn't going to be affecting the tangles. And so you have so many different options here, and we're going to get ready to put strings on these really soon.
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right. Thanks for joining me, Julie.
Thank you, Molly.
All right. We'll see you soon.